Schumer willing to help candidates who want him gone? With the article saying, it's particularly in Michigan, Schumer has quietly signaled that he would be okay with Senator Mallory McMorrow, even though he has long been supporting the moderate centrist Haley Stevens. And I think this is like kind of an interesting thing that is happening here, because we'll sort of walk through it. But Schumer has his preferred candidates, right? He has Janet Mills, who he like ruthlessly recruited in Maine. He has Josh Turek in Iowa. He has Haley Stevens in Michigan. He got Mary Peltola in Alaska. He sort of has his preferred candidates. A lot of those preferred candidates are in trouble and struggling.
It's a mixed bag because, as you say, Peltola, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, Roy Cooper in North Carolina, all three of them effectively, like everyone in the party agreed that they were the strongest possible candidate. There's no real opposition to them. So those were like home run recruits that very well may flip the Senate. In the other races, I think it's going to be a bad scorecard for old Chucky here, and not terribly surprising. I wouldn't say he's got his finger on the pulse of the average American at this point. 97 years in the Senate will do that to you. But this is the right play at this point to be like, obviously, if Platner wins in Maine, although I think he has a lot more qualms about that, but if Platner wins in Maine, if Peggy Flanagan wins in Minnesota, where they would have preferred, I think, Angie Craig, but Flanagan seems to be ahead, or if Abdul El-Sayed wins in Michigan, which could also happen, you have to support the Democrat. We need all of those seats. The Senate's going to come down to one or two seats. And that's the right play. This is what Nancy Pelosi has done forever. She's like, just say whatever you need to say to go get elected. If you need to be like, Nancy Pelosi's the worst, say it, and then good luck trying to not have me be the speaker. I just need 218 warm bodies.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mallory was interestingly, I think the first Senate candidate of everyone in this cycle to say Schumer should not be the leader moving forward. So particularly interesting that he is willing to give her the stamp of approval here.
100%. If you look at the odds in the race right now, across markets, everybody's got Mallory McMorrow in Michigan up. El-Sayed gaining a little bit, at least on Kalshi, but there's sort of this consensus that Stevens is sort of drifting away, but the polling is really pretty tight. The average polling has Stevens in second to McMorrow and El-Sayed in third, but surging. One of the most recent polls that came out was a poll commissioned by McMorrow, where McMorrow's campaign basically argued that she was up 5 on El-Sayed and Stevens was totally trailing. And you can start to see that McMorrow's campaign is sort of clearly trying to get into a 1v1 with El-Sayed, pick voters off from Haley Stevens, and is, trying to do that on the insider track. On the sort of voter track, you can see that, I think this fight that she's having with Hassan Piker is an attempt to try to win sort of Stevens base voters, a lot of whom are sort of Jewish voters who are outside Detroit, by picking that fight and try to close it down.
Yeah, and I think it's a smart calculation. I mean, case in point, Chuck Schumer kind of tipping his hand that he would be okay with it, because I think that she has calculated correctly that the establishment will be fine with her, and she would rather have a one-on-one against Abdul El-Sayed, and the establishment does not want Abdul to be the nominee. So, I mean, it's a smart play. I think she would be fine in a one-on-one against either of them, but it does make sense to me to try to isolate Abdul El-Sayed, because she will win sort of the moderate progressive and the moderate centrist, were that the case. But I mean, it's basically a three-way tie at this point, and I don't see any indication that Haley Stevens would drop out. What do you think?
If I'm the Stevens campaign, I'm not thinking about dropping out, because she's, depends on the poll, doing pretty well. And there is this dynamic that she does not speak to the aesthetics of people in Washington, certainly. And there's, all the clips that bounce around of her being sort of awkward. But I think a lot of people from Michigan, that they have aunts and, family members who are just like Haley Stevens and have the accent and do all that stuff. And so I do think, McMorrow obviously needs to close the race down and move as many voters as she can and sort of put Stevens, and needs to be competitive with her and not El-Sayed. But man, I don't know, there's no reason. The only thing that's brutal about that Michigan primary is how late it is.
Yeah,
I mean, it's all the way
August 14th,
it's super late.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is you're just in this brutal primary, and then you're right in the general election.
Yeah,
brutal.
and I think that the national atmospherics are going to be heavy enough in Democrats' favor, barring something totally unforeseen over the next few months, that even if we end up with Abdul El-Sayed as the nominee and that doesn't get resolved until super late and it's been a super hostile primary, I think that Democrats will still be fine. But Republicans are all unified behind Mike Rogers here, that he's a pretty strong candidate, all things considered. So it's a little dicier of a situation than you want to be in.
And I think there's a lot of Republicans who vote for Democrats, but boy, if a normal seeming Republican rolls up, they're like, thank God I'm going to go vote for, you know what I mean? I think there's a never Trumper who's literally never Trump, and then is, but he's, if Charlie Baker showed up, they'd crawl over coals.
Right. And again, I think Abdul El-Sayed would still win, but that's a much harder crawl for someone who's like, I've always voted Republican, but I'm not like super happy with the country. That's a bit like Abdul El-Sayed is for Medicare for all, and has been outspoken about a whole bunch of issues that have rubbed people the wrong way.
Graham Platner is basically kicking Janet Mills' ass. You can see every market basically has it as a foregone conclusion, including the Platner campaign is basically speaking of it as a foregone conclusion. Also seems like the Mills campaign is speaking of it as a foregone conclusion. Looking at the polling, I mean, Graham Platner, the averages just have him all the way up. Maine, of course, a difficult state to poll, but like 20 points is 20 points up, man. I mean, that is a runaway.
Like, I get the thing where it's like, oh, Janet Mills has won statewide multiple times. Like, she's the sitting governor of Maine. Of course, that's the strongest candidate. Like, it was just so obvious to me from the beginning that, like, running someone who's going to be 79 years old before they would take their oath of office and have a 6-year term, like, after the Biden debacle, no offense, like, just like a crazy time to run, like, and to think that an establishment moderate 79-year-old is the best candidate, you know?
Yeah. Well, Janet Mills seems to have dropped all of her attack ads, but it says she's full steam ahead. Sort of a snafu last week where it seemed like she was pulling out of debates, but she wasn't. And then she said, well, I'm going to different debates. And now she sort of pulled her ads down. She's dark on TV. Platner is up on TV. The fundraising delta is like pretty high. She put out her fundraising numbers last week, which was less than she raised in the previous quarter, which is not good. Platner hasn't put his numbers out, but he has raised a ton of money. I mean, it's just like, she is not in a good position.
No, you don't want to be in this situation where you are the sitting governor and you're like a heavy underdog and having to go all negative. Yeah. Just a tough spot.
She is in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of questions around DC about whether or not she's thinking about dropping out. And this is why she's pulling the ads down. I have no insider information on that.
I put a little feeler out to a couple people that are maybe in the loop. I did not get a response.
Yeah, it seems like
talk to me when you get like one invite to a White House Correspondents' Dinner.
You have one.
I have one. Yeah, that was a favor, basically.
I have 0. But yes, it seems like she is in a bit of a tough situation. Platner, for his part, saying that it's over, pivoting to the general.
I'm not sure that's like he's not like running ads that are like, hello, it's over.
It's me. I'm running.
It's over.
Platner's team is signaling that it's over. The interesting thing that's in it, though, is this implicit message. I mean, put out a memo last week, essentially saying that Mills' negative ads aren't working. And this was always sort of the thing, right? Mills went really hard at him, has been hammering him on, the allegations about the way he talked about women and sexual assault and all these kinds of things. And they are saying it has not moved the dial at all. This is sort of the question, right? This is why you want Mills to go negative on him right now, because you'd rather it be him than Susan Collins in the Senate Leadership Fund.
Right. And I think like that was always the question was going to be, does this hurt when you put a bunch of gross rating points behind whatever, hundreds of thousands of dollars of ads, like circulating these comments that people may not have seen? Does that damage him? It seems so far the answer is no. I do think it helps that he had done like 50 town halls across Maine before this came out. And like a lot of people have heard from him directly where he's addressed those questions directly. And again, something to be said for like actually going places and talking to voters.
Yeah, 100%. I do think it's interesting watching what Schumer is doing, though, to the initial point. Last week, or maybe actually this was a couple of weeks ago, Axios reporting that Chuck Schumer has deployed Susan Collins messaging out of Senate Majority PAC, which is the super PAC that helps elect Senate candidates, and they move money to different sort of places from different groups and all the above. He's going negative on Collins. He's not really doing anything to help with Mills. It is interesting to me that, he's in a position where he doesn't want to injure Graham Platner, because it seems like Platner may well be the nominee and you don't want that stuff out there. It seems like there's just not enough to get him over the hump.
Yeah, I think the writing's on the wall at this point, and everyone's like, well, we're not going to go nuclear on the nominee, which, unlike in some of the Republican races.
Yep, 100%.
Nobody knows anything.